So today we have with us Melina Pruett-Jones. She is the Executive Director of the American Ornithologists Union and the past Executive Director of Chicago Wilderness, as well as John Hartig, who's a Refuge Manager of the Detroit International Wildlife Refuge. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for starting our discussion. So today we're going to first cover kind of why the Great Lakes. Tell us a little bit about migration, and then later on we're going to talk a little bit more about the conservation that we do for migratory birds. So Melinda, this time of year is just a spectacular time of year. And I don't think that most people understand the migration, the nature of migration. So can you tell us a little bit about where these birds are coming from and where they're going to?
Well, migration is, I think, one of the world's greatest spectacles. And every year, billions of birds globally are moving long distances from one place to another for a variety of reasons, but it's for food, and whether it's in grasslands or wetlands, they're going after insects or fish. They're traveling from food-rich areas, from the wintering grounds to food-rich areas where they would breed and raise their young. And so the Great Lakes is an incredible place for, as Christy explained, you know, both we have birds that are migrating here to breed, shorter migrations, and other birds that are coming through and stopping over and going north.
Yeah, so John, there's this concept of flyways, and can you describe flyways a little bit and why the Great Lakes is at an intersection of this incredible flyways?
Yeah, so migration routes come together and form flyways. You have major ones. So think of migration routes as a subset of flyways. And here we have the intersection right where we're sitting of the intersection of two major flyways, the Atlantic and the Mississippi, and well-known routes where birds travel to breeding grounds and then to overwinter, searching food, searching cover, searching rest.
So what makes this area unique, John? You talked about that intersection of flyways, but are there some other factors here that are really unique for these birds?
Well, in these long migrations, like you think of Detroit River, they need stopover habitat. They need these islands. They need woodlots, grasslands, wetlands. If you think of it from a waterfowl perspective, all the waterfowl that migrate from Canada down, they stop to rest and feed on wild celery in the river. Just think of diving ducks, and it's an amazing phenomenon to see. You can still see today, you can stand at the mouth of the Detroit River and you can watch, and there are enough ducks sitting out there when they lift off the water that it will change the color of the sky.
Wow. I always think, this is one of my favorite examples, somebody showed me this, wow, some of these songbirds that have come through, they weigh about 9 or 10 grams. You know, that's about as much as 3 nickels in your hand, and these birds are flying 1,000, 2,000, maybe more miles. And so the importance of all those habitats you talked about, and again, not just natural areas, but in our urban areas as well, right, Melinda?
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you talk about small birds, one of the smallest birds that we're all familiar with is the ruby-throated hummingbird. And it flies 2,000 miles. Yeah. And it loses half of its body weight when it's traveling. And they fly over the Gulf of Mexico, and then they fly over the corn and soybean deserts of our, of our productive landscapes. And when they get up to the woodlands and the, urban forests to protected forests and woodlands, they get very busy eating and getting their weight back on. And then what's interesting too is how females and the males actually travel at different times. So they segregate their migration timing so that if something happens, the whole population is not affected.
So one of my colleagues, Dave Ewart, often talks about the habitat needs, and he talks about kind of the fire escapes and the convenience stores and the full-service hotels that all these birds need, because they're oftentimes starving, very, very hungry, and they need just any place is good to refuel.
Right.
Yeah. So John, tell me also about kind of we see some threats to these birds as they're migrating through. Migration is a very stressful time of the year. Most birds in the lifespan, the highest mortality is during migration. So what kind of threats are they facing here in the Great Lakes, or obstacles or barriers to these migrations?
In Detroit, they're coming through, and you can imagine everything from skyscrapers and glass windows to wet cooling towers that they cannot differentiate, to wind turbines out in there, a whole variety of things. Predation coming through. We have the common terns are just returning right now, and one of the biggest source of mortality is predation during the nesting season. So there's a whole variety of factors in that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see also, I mean, you work in Chicago region, what are you seeing there as well?
Well, as Fred said, you have the bird collisions happening with respect to the buildings, and what they found in Chicago is by lowering the lights, they reduced the mortality by 80%, which was very significant.
And they probably save a little energy too.
They did, and there's almost 300 species of birds that migrate through Chicago. One of the biggest threats is domestic cats.
Okay.
And so keeping your cats indoors is really, really important for birds during migration. And then the fragmentation of the landscape as well.
Now we were talking earlier too, and you mentioned that, these birds have no sense of property boundaries or state boundaries or political boundaries. So every bit of land and how we manage these lands is just as important.
That's correct. Yeah. Absolutely right.
So when we get down to kind of the management of these stopover sites, John, what do you see on the ground that we can start to do, or how we manage or treat or protect our lands?
Well, all these habitats are important. Wetlands, we've lost 97% of our coastal wetlands on the Detroit River. That means what's left is so vital, so precious, and we need to have a net gain. We need to restore that back. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the stopover habitats. We are so developed. We have 7 million people in a 45-minute drive, mm-hmm. and there's so much concrete and steel and everything else. And so we need to build back stopover habitats. What we're doing through the International Wildlife Refuge is obviously the federal government or the state government or whomever could not do it by themselves. It has to be everyone working together. So we're working with corporations right now. Our enabling legislation talks about using public-private partnerships. So if a power plant only needs a certain percentage of its land to produce energy, could we work with them through a cooperative management agreement mm-hmm. to manage lands? And that's what we're doing. 656 acres with DTE called the Laguna Beach Unit. We have other examples with Consumers Power, and BASF is managing Fighting Island, 1,200 acres in the river for stopover habitat. So we have to do it all together. It's all important, from what government does, the non-governmental sector, mm-hmm. to cities, to corporations, to backyard habitat.
Right. All right, well, thanks. We're going to shift to another video, or some questions from the audience now that are going to further up some of our knowledge.
Yeah, I think I'd like to open it up right now, because this has already started a very interesting conversation of how birds are adapting in our ever-changing environment right now. So I want to open it up. Who's got some questions? Do you have a question, ma'am? Come on, stand up and tell us who you are, where you're from.
Thank you. My name is Lana Jerome, and I'm with Grass Lake Sanctuary.
Okay, Lana.
We're a retreat sanctuary between Chelsea and Manchester, and we host retreats for women recovering from breast cancer, but we're also a 145-acre nature preserve.
Oh, wonderful.
So my question is, while we've got great diversity, how can we, on a large scale, help our neighbors? We have a Creatures in Residence program, so whether they're passing through, we'd like them to feel at home. How can we help our friends that are passing? I mean, it's really important to us.
It's important, and it seems like it would be a simple question, but it's one I think that we all kind of have on our mind. How can we help? Who would like to tackle that one?
We'll look at you, Melinda.
Yes. Well, so I think Svet was explaining, it's the partnership. So as you think about whether it's your backyard and your community, how you can be working together to think about your landscape more holistically. The connectivity from one landscape, whether it's your local library and school and the park and business and et cetera, how all that landscape fits together, and that you actually set a common goal and work on that goal together. And that way you have a greater impact for wildlife, not only birds, but wildlife generally. And you're creating habitat that provides shelter, food, nesting sites, breeding sites, all the different aspects of habitat that they need, but big enough so that you're getting populations in there that can sustain themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think you can manage your land yourself with those native plantings, with providing all different kind of structure, small shrubs, tall trees, grassland areas, but then you can also keep working out and talking to your neighbors about how they manage their land, talking to your township about how they manage their natural lands. John?
We call that working beyond our boundaries. We all have to learn to work beyond our boundaries if we're going to achieve our common goals. So working on schoolyard habitat and industrial habitat and parks. And the other aspect of this is when there is new development, and this has come to the forefront in Detroit with the Detroit Riverwalk. You have 5.5 miles of waterfront being redeveloped from the ground up, and it's the largest by scale urban waterfront redevelopment project in the United States. It's at the design phase that we can add in unique habitat features, some stopover habitat to do some really special things. So we need to be doing that.
And great to be able to take advantage of that resource that we do have there on the Detroit River. Who else has a question that we want to go to right now? Don't be shy. Come on, stand up, ma'am. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Susan Cooper, and I'm from Birmingham, Michigan. I've been associated with Detroit Public Television for many, many years.
All right, Susan, what's your question?
It's a very ordinary question, but it relates to the previous question in a way. It's always been controversial whether backyard bird feeding is a plus or a negative for birds, and I would like your opinion as to whether the stop and start method, feeding only in the winter, or should you be feeding year-round, which is better, or neither, or a combination?
Melinda, do you want to take a first shot at that one too? If you can.
Well, I think there's many schools of thought on it. There are some organizations that have done some really wonderful research on this. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a really good resource to answer that question, and what's right for you and what's right for your habitat. There are many people that feed just in the winter because they're landscaping their land, their backyard and their front yard for wildlife. Others that are living perhaps in a more sterile environment, it's all lawn in the front, that feeder might be very, very important year-round. So I think you could find really good resources from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology on that.
I mean, I tend to look at not just the feeding station, but my whole yard as an opportunity to provide habitat for birds. So making sure that I have those native plantings that are providing seed and or berries throughout the year. So it goes much more beyond the bird feeding. And I guess also, I mean, part of the reason we feed the birds is for our own personal enjoyment and to tie us to nature. So I wouldn't want to get so caught up in worrying about the impact on birds that I forget about my own personal reasons, my own personal enjoyment, because it's highly gratifying and satisfying. And again, my first experience was at those bird feeders, and I wouldn't want to have lost that.